let's tackle masculine versus feminine shapes. Feminine shapes we have already discussed with our figure, where we've done kind of like the hips and things like that. If you just want kind of a neutral shape, the best thing to go with for your upper body and your lower body are just evenly wide boxes. So if this was our figure, this is the upper body, this is the lower body. We attach our hips, our knees, our feet come out, shoulders. We're still keeping the same rough proportions, but we have a very neutral figure. So we'll just put in here for neutral. For a more feminized figure, the base shapes change a little bit from this square to two triangles meeting on their points, and the knees slant inward towards this center mass. I made those knees a little short, but and when we talk of a masculine figure, we tend to just have this triangular top and then a more square bottom that fits just inside of these triangular shapes, where we have a bit wider shoulders than our hips. Our hips don't come out here, but our waist doesn't come in as far either, because we have to end up connecting these shapes. So by changing up these basic proportions, we can change quite a few things. And then there are more advanced versions of each of these as well, which we studied the more advanced version of the feminine figure already, where everything remains very curvy. Kind of, I like to keep all of my lines nice and curvaceous. And poses get a little bit more almost exaggerated, honestly. There's a similar exaggeration to men's drawing as well, especially when it comes to body proportions, because I think we're very familiar with culturally the idea of women's beauty standards. Men's beauty standards are also equally weird. It's just that women's beauty standards tend to be enforced more upon the average person, whereas men's beauty standards tend to be enforced extremely upon like actors and models and things like that. And then the average person is more just like, yeah, he's an average looking dude, not a model. And part of that is because throughout history, it has just been seen as more feminine to try to change your shape to like match up and fit these beauty standards more specifically. But if we look historically, there was a lot of padding and corsetry going on for men as well. So do with that information what you will. When we come into drawing a more advanced version of a masculine figure, we get we broaden out through the shoulders. We invert this V, the waist drops down to hit the top of the hip versus this center point. And then just inside here is where we actually have our hips drop. And we still get this shape. It's just a lot more boxy. In Western canon, which is just like how we view and think of the figure in art, women equals curvy and men equals square, like very angular. So we might start with a figure more like this and then build out emphasis on shoulders, trapezius muscles. We're going to have to make this neck a little higher. Work on getting that head, and then keeping the figure muscular, but not overly muscular. Not like bodybuilder muscular, like model muscular, which I will say there's been some like really interesting movements in the male model world towards like what is considered good for fashion. It's gone more towards this neutral shape, in fact, recently, versus a more like muscular shape. So that's interesting. The waist hits down here before a slight widening out to the hip. We have, of course, our groin, beefier thigh. Whoops. Made that a little bit too much. Beefier thigh, nice kind of sculpted knee, and then usually a nice sculpted calf as well as part of this drawing. We'll look at men's fashion more specifically at a later date as well. But if you're interested in drawing menswear, just keep in mind that the legs don't get as elongated as they do for the female fashion figure, although they're still pretty elongated, especially the lower leg. In fact, I had to make this a little bit longer as I drew it. I made both of my heads a little low here. So that is kind of our overview of if you want to draw a more masculine. You can see that this triangle just continues throughout the whole shape. Whereas here we have that inverted triangle, if you're trying to think of it that way. So if you want to draw a more masculine figure, you're totally welcome. If you want to go towards a more neutral figure, how I would tend to draw that is, I give myself my head, and then I would relax the curve and keep it a little more angular. We're just kind of trying to hit nicely in the middle of having some curves versus some more planar shapes. So this could be really good, especially like in athletic wear. You tend to get more of just a neutral figure, or like non-gendered wear, where it's just it's this kind of almost, I don't know if it's a less exaggerated female figure or a less exaggerated masculine figure. It's somewhere in between. This, of course, does not like line up with any sort of like idea, like cultural ideas around gender, really. It's just about trying to hit a midpoint where it's easy for either men or women or anyone in between to see themselves wearing your clothes. In between or beyond, I suppose. Yeah, so a more neutral figure, what I tend to do is I tend to keep the waist about at this midpoint but I just make it less extreme. And then once again, if you're drawing for a specific person, observing how their proportions work, always good. Because that changes how you design things and where lines hit and what sort of waistlines you choose. So this is our brief spectrum for, I guess, gender drawings in the fashion world. I'm going to stop this here and we're going to go